Hello humans, and welcome to a discussion video about triangle strategy. So I did say I was going to make a few videos, and this is one of the first ones. I figured I'd do a little bit of a light-hearted tier list on what I thought of the units that we've been using, and we're going to rank them based on how nice their asses are. Oh wait, that's the Genshin script. I'm sorry. We're going to do them on how good they are in the gameplay, and I figured I'd bring along a friend to help me do that, so say hi to Eldervi.
Hi, and wait a second. I prepared my opinions on the asses.
Oh, did you?
What am I gonna do now? Okay, I guess I played the demo, so I might have an opinion on their strength as well. We'll try.
Yeah, and you also played on hard mode while I only played on normal, so that kind of gives us a little bit of balance for both perspectives for people who are watching who might want to play on either one of the difficulties.
True, I hope so. I am so very excited for this game. I can't tell you.
Oh yeah, I've been going crazy just doing tons and tons of reading and looking at analyzing all the little screenshots from all the trailers, and this game needs to come out already.
I mean, those last few trailers we got, they were so good. So good.
Very juicy, lots of information.
So if you haven't seen them, check them out. This game is going to blow your mind.
Absolutely. Nintendo, for some reason, put in only a 30-second segment of the final trailer in the Direct, so I actually missed that until a couple days ago. Anyways, just a little disclaimer before we start the tier list. I know it's super silly to make a tier list based off the demo and have that information be set in stone moving forward, so do not take this as the definitive tier list for 10 units based off 3 chapters of use. I know this is going to be obsolete as soon as the game comes out and these units are able to go past level 5, but I figured it would be nice to have a little preliminary opinion on what we think of them now and what we think of their potential moving forward and some of the general ways we use these units. So if we're wrong, we'll be happy to eat our words later and you can let us know in the comments, but this is just for fun, so we're just going to share our opinions with you.
So, who are we going to start with?
I mean, I guess we'll start with our main character, Serenoa. Might as well start at the top. I have them sorted in terms of when these units show up, in terms of availability, so we can just start from the left and go to the right. So, you want to kick us off with what you think of Serenoa?
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's obviously the main character, so he has to be good in a sense. And I feel like he is. He's like a really damage based, but also with a little bit of utility in there. And I think he's going to be a great fighter in the end game. Really a tanky fighter. And I think he's really quite good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's definitely the main melee DPS unit that we've gotten so far in this game. I mean, Roland can be kind of put in that category a little bit, but it feels like Serenoa's pure damage output is very high, if not one of the highest in this demo so far. And I really like his delayed strike. It kind of helps you mess around with a little bit of the turn order delay kind of thing. So on normal mode, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and he's supposed to be in the fight because the skills he learns, he's extremely good in these like partner attacks when you're standing on both sides of the enemy. So he's really good in that, and he's going to learn a counter attack, I think, pretty early. So he's meant to be in the fight.
Yeah, I remember that from the first demo that he got his own counter. So I think he's an excellent character, but where would you put him on the tier list?
It's quite difficult to start with him, but I think, to be fair, he will be top tier.
Really? You think so?
Yeah, I think so. He's the main unit. He's not supposed to die. Like, you're obviously not punished if the units die, but I think he's made to survive a lot, especially in the late game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was struggling a bit with positioning him, but I think, he has to be A at least.
Yeah,
And
I would agree.
Maybe even higher. I would put him higher.
I think we can go back and fix this at the end and resort it, But I personally would probably put him somewhere in A tier, just because I think some of these other characters are more heavily useful in the long run, I would say.
I'm excited to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, well, the next one, I'll kick us off with the next one, which is Frederica. And that's who I honestly think is super S tier in this situation. Now, I know she probably has some survivability issues on hard mode because you take more damage there. And so she probably goes down in 2 hits and you really need to protect her. But in my opinion, Frederica probably goes in S tier just because she has the AoE Scorch attack that hits in a plus formation, so you can hit up to 5 enemies if they're all jumbled together. And for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to make AoEs not hit your own allies. So that really boosts her up for me, exponentially, because I can just fire at will, left and right without having to worry about where the location is.
True. To be honest, I don't remember the first demo, but in this one, I think it took me till chapter 3 till I actually realized that she doesn't damage her allies, because I obviously tried not to do it whatsoever. So I was really shocked when I saw that she was just targeting the enemies. So that's great. That's really powerful. The thing that strikes me, I don't know. I kind of remember that it was easier for her in the first demo to do her spells. I think the mages are gonna have a huge TP issue with doing these spells, because she can do her big attack and then she almost has to sit around out. So in terms of damage output, it's again half, and then if you don't hit like 4 enemies but only 2, then it's like the same damage output than these normal units again. So we'll have to see if the TP management gets better in the late game. I think she actually struggles a bit in the early game, but I think she'll be a beast in late game.
I actually would probably agree with you there. In terms of the class system, when she promotes, or whenever any unit promotes, they get +1 to their max TP. And when you were saying it was easier for her to be used in the previous demo, that's because everyone in the previous demo actually had 5 TP, whereas in this one we're starting with 3. So you're right there, we had more to play with in the previous one. But I think one thing that we're also not mentioning for Frederica is the fact that she has the Flame Wall skill, which gives counter to any unit for 2 turns. And that one is only a 1 TP cost, so you can open with that on whichever unit you want to be on the front lines. And then by the time all the other enemy units are grouped, like she's got some very big combo potential with someone like Erador if he uses the Provoke and gets all the enemies grouped together, and then she can nuke with the Scorch later. So I don't know what
she has, that. And she'll surely be the damage mage in this setup, because from what we've seen in the trailer, you can set props and things like that on fire. And I mean, who wouldn't want to burn up the entire map with a mage? I mean, that's so cool.
That's kind of, my entire existence, right?
That's really badass. So alone, just for that, she deserves to be an S tier, honestly.
Yeah, I think she's really, really good. She was one of my first units to level 5, and I just want to drop her in S tier. Again, I don't know what her survivability was like on hard mode, but on normal mode, once she leveled up a little bit, she could take a few hits.
Oh, it was terrible in hard mode.
Yeah.
Actually, most of these squishy units died with 2 attacks, and you're obviously outnumbered most of the time, so if you didn't manage your units well, you could just die in round 1 with one of these units and they're gone. Not forever, obviously, but it was hard. It was hard. You really had to think about it in hard mode.
I mean, it's a good thing that we do have that mode, because I would like a specific difficulty, level of difficulty to actually have to think about things down the line, of course. I like to start playing my games on normal, because I feel like that's where they're balanced at, and that's how I can fairly review and assess a game, and then once I go through it once and I want a challenge, I can toss myself into hard mode.
A thing we probably have to mention for the mages is a thing they are missing is the kind of partner attack. Because they obviously proc it when they're attacking and someone else stands behind the enemy. But if someone else is attacking and they're the one standing behind the enemy, they will just kind of clonk at them with their book or stuff or a little thing. So you're kind of missing out a bit on damage with them on this point. But I guess just to nitpick a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely survivability and damage with combo attacks, but they, exchange it for being able to hit multiple enemies at the same time. All right, Geela, who's our next one, and she is our main healer or white mage kind of class. I'll let you kick this one off since I started off Frederica.
So I actually have a question to you. Which of the units did you drop in Chapter 3?
The unit I dropped in Chapter 3 was actually Hughette.
Okay.
She just was not performing very well for me.
You played the Heisent route,
exactly,
right?
Yes.
So I played both of them, the Heisent and the Frost route, and I dropped Erador in Heisent, and then because he's just personally not my type of character, but we'll come to that later. And then in Frost, I actually dropped Geela.
Interesting.
Because I tried the map twice, and in my first try I dropped Erador again, but I realized that this map had really a different difficulty from the other maps in enemy positionings, and Geela was really a problem because she has low movement, she had troubles reaching my allies, and she just died in the back rows, which was really bad. And I did drop her there, and there's a thing I want to say about her. In these early chapters we got to play, she's pretty much pointless, I would actually say, because her heal, it heals a lot, of course, but everyone can use these healing pellets on your allies with a range of 1. So everyone can actually be a type of healer in these early chapters, and she struggles with low speed, she struggles with low movement, and she can't hit anything for good, so I would actually put her really, really low.
Interesting. You bring up a really valid point that I hadn't really considered. See, to me, usually a healer is just immediately relatively high up, or at least average. And when I was thinking about Geela, I was like, well, she saves me money from having to buy healing pellets in the first place. But you're right. She really doesn't do anything.
That's true. I think it's a question of grinding, because you obviously can grind a lot of money and then you can buy these items. If you don't grind, she will be very valuable because, as you say, she saves you a lot of expenses. But in these early chapters, she really has a hard time.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you now that I think about it. I was originally going to probably put her in B, but now I would either go bottom of B, later on, or maybe even C, actually. What do you think?
So I would actually put her in C right now. She will obviously get the AoE healing, so this will change a lot for her, I think, later in the game. But
and if she gets something like a revive as well, that'll be huge.
Of course. I kind of wonder, because from what we've seen, we will probably get other healers as well, and other healers that are more utility-based. I wonder if she will stick to the just healing and healing tons of damage, or if she'll actually get more utility-based spells as well. I think she had the haste.
Yes,
so
she did, yes.
Good, but haste is not the most important one when you consider that we have the how do you spell it, the quietus thing?
Yeah, exactly. Quietus is how I say it. I think in the trailer they said quietus, but I don't know. Just fun fact, we actually do have a revive quietus that I found in one of the trailers, so.
Yeah, you can only use them once, but I think I usually love my healers. But this time, I thought, well, she's not as good as some of the other options.
Yeah, and the pellets heal more than she heals, don't they?
Yeah, really good. I mean, I used the small ones, and they were enough, even in hard mode. And I think we also get bigger ones. So
yeah,
you're fine in the early game without her. And as I said, I dropped her in the Frost chapter, and I was honestly doing better without her. So
yeah, I think C tier is fair for her. You made some very good points that I agree with all of them, really, so I can't debate you there, so C tier is fine with me. Let's move on to our only mounted unit so far in the game, Roland. So Roland is a little bit of an interesting case for me. He only gets 1 more movement than your other infantry units, 2 more than the mages and Erador. And I've been struggling on where to put him. He's nice because he has a lance, and the lance hits 2 squares in front of him, so you can hit multiple units at the same time. But as a result, because of the damage formula, which was worked out by someone on Reddit, I'll put some credit on the screen, or the formula on the screen, but Roland has a lower damage modifier than some of the other units, so his damage is multiplied by 0.7 or 70% of whatever the base is, and I assume that's because he hits multiple units at the same time. So his damage isn't as strong as someone like a Serenoa, or even Erador, who's got a huge damage buff, or even, I forgot what this guy's name was.
Rudolph.
Rudolph apparently does a lot of damage too, or even someone like Hughette. But his movement and his utility, he also gets, I think it's a skill that hits, I think it's called Rush. It hits 3 lanes in front of him, and he gets to move on the other side. So he's got that mobility aspect to him, but he's not doing that much damage. Also, I just personally don't really like him very much yet, so I think that's biasing my take a little bit. But I would be more inclined to put Roland maybe somewhere in B tier or at the bottom of A tier at best. I don't know what you think.
I think what's interesting, all these units start with like some base abilities, and what I really like about this game is that they tried a lot to make the battles realistic, like the critical hits if you attack from behind and the partner attacks and stuff like that. It's a really, really realistic design, also with fire hitting ice and ice hitting fire and all the effects they have there. And Roland actually has, if I understood it right, Roland has a passive ability that makes him weak to lances, which makes sense because the riders are of course weak to lances with their horses and stuff like that. But it strikes me because it's like he doesn't gain something apart from being on a horse, obviously, and having the higher mobility and getting to use a lance himself. So it's like a balancing thing to give him this weakness to lances. But as you said, the mobility is only 1 point higher. And then I start to wonder, is it really that good? So he's obviously meant to have big mobility. He's meant to have a big zone control, I would say, with his movement options and rushing through the enemy and changing his position. But I think he will end up being weaker than Serenoa. So if we stick with Serenoa in A, I would say he can only go at the end of A or maybe B. I don't know.
Let's put him at B to start with. I agree. I actually didn't know he was weak to lances. I didn't really pay attention to that, but that's funny because he spent most of his time training with Maxwell, who was like the spear master, and you're weak to lances. I guess, like you said, it does make sense in a warfare sort of thing, but yeah, it's funny. All right, let's move on to one of my favorite units to have played with, and I'm going to give you the honor of starting out and talking about Anna.
I mean, Anna is really a cool character. Her passive ability of moving twice is awesome. It's really awesome. It allows for so many different play styles and movement shenanigans and stuff like that. It's kind of awesome. It seems like she's lacking a bit of damage. So from the formula you showed earlier, it seems like she has, I think, a 50% reduced attack.
Right, her multiplier is 0.5. So like Roland is 0.7, Anna does 0.5.
Which makes sense because she gets to go twice. So in the end, it's at a flat out 1 again. But what she obviously brings is a lot of utility. She has the poison attack right from the start. I think she's going to have a sleep kind attack later in the game. I think we had that in the first demo. And she obviously gets to hide, which is such a cool skill. I think the damage output actually doesn't even matter that much for her. It's really her mobility and utility she brings to the game, which really makes her good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the main thing here to really look at is Act Twice. I think Act Twice is nuts because she's very fast, so she's going to be able to move eventually multiple times before enemies are able to move once. And that's going to let her get in behind the enemy for back attacks or easily come back to you to combo with some of your characters. And one of the more interesting combos I found with Anna is comboing with the Quietuses. So the critical blow one, because of the way it acts, critical blow lets you do guaranteed critical hits from any direction around your enemy for 1 turn. So that's all you get. But because Act Twice is considered within a single turn, she gets to do 2 critical hits. And she also gets to trigger 2 back attacks or 2 combos. Or she can, do an attack and use an item, for example. The amount of potential with 2 actions is amazing, especially coupled with her great speed, that I can't really put Anna anywhere but at the top of S tier, even above Frederica at this point. She was my first. I agree. She was my first unit to level 5 in this demo.
I agree. And even if her damage falls off in the late game, it's just the utility is huge. Getting 2 enemies to sleep in round 1 right away is massive for these fights. So yeah, I agree. She's really good.
She's fantastic. All right, so let's move on to Benedict, who is one of our main, the last of our main 3 people. So I think he's the one who represents utility in this game, and he's Serenoa's main advisor. And Benedict is the tactician/strategist role here. And so what he does is he has very low damage output, but he makes up for that in support and buffs. So I think in the demo so far, we have a buff to damage, and we have a buff to defenses, and then I think we have a buff to movement and jump so far. And I believe I saw a skill that can give you another action or something like that. They won't. You can't really see it because they don't let you see the descriptions. But just from the name, that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, we saw it. It had a little act again symbol. So yeah.
So Benedict is an interesting one for me because he never really does any damage at all. Even his follow-ups are very, very weak. They're almost on par with the mages, I think, in terms of the damage they do.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with where to place him because his utility is so good, but it's not so necessary just yet. But his potential in the long run is probably crazy, especially if some of these buffs start being AoE and covering multiple characters at once. And so I'm not going to put him on Geela tier because he definitely feels like he has more usefulness than Geela, especially, buffing someone like a Frederica for a big nuke. That's big. Or someone like Anna for hitting twice. Or someone like, Erador for helping the tank. So his combo potential and the flexibility of his usage is just super vast. And I think that's really good to the point where I would actually consider putting him either in A tier or just above Roland in B tier. But you go ahead and tell me if I'm wrong.
I think it's really coming down to the late game because in these early chapters he's really not doing that much. I mean the utility buffs he has so far with the attack and the defense, it's actually not that good, I would argue, in these early chapters. But as you said, we saw that he gets an attack which makes the ally move again, which makes the ally move twice. So that's really great. And we also saw these kind of shield animation in multiple trailers actually.
Yeah.
Which I would guess is maybe going to be like some Final Fantasy Reflect or something like that. They've shown it very prominently through various trailers, so it must be quite a big boost to these characters. And I think in the long term, the damage from single characters won't be as good as the damage from AoE characters. And that's why I would say that the utility spells will be better in the late game than the damage of single characters. Does it make sense? Kinda?
Yeah, a little
I struggled a bit there.
I mean, he's not really doing damage. It's more so the damage that he's granting to others.
So that's what I wanted to say, what I tried to say, is that I agree with you that he's probably a bit better than Roland in the end game, because his utility is just better than the damage output Roland can give you. I think so, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I think B tier is a fair medium for him here because, again, once he gets all his buffs out, he just kind of sits there on the map at this point. So it really is. He
gets to do something every round, and what I really liked is that he can do these buffs from a distance.
Yeah.
He didn't have to stand next to the unit, which is something I always did because it's just so. I kind of learned it this way, that the units have to stand next to each other to do buffs and stuff like that, and it's really cool that he can do it from a distance and potentially move after that to get in a great position. So I think that's really good also.
Yeah, and I guess now that you said that, something came to mind, which is also talking about the EXP gain.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these units have actions that they can do where they gain EXP, and Benedict is one of those who never really needs to be involved in combat to level up, as well as someone like Geela or Frederica, and I think Anna also has one. So Benedict doesn't really suffer from not being able to hit things or kill things, because every single turn he's able to launch a buff and gain EXP consistently, so he'll never really fall behind.
Yeah. Which is great for these support characters.
Yep. All right, this next one I think is going to be a point of contention, because Hughette seems to be one of the first characters that we run into that is really good on one route and really bad on the other one. And I'm going to let you go ahead and start off and have this one, so let me know what you think.
I really, really, really struggled with her in the first demo because she died a lot for me and she didn't do much damage and her skills were kind of lackluster. But I think a thing for her which we really have to figure out is the mobility. And I didn't do that much in my first run, which is why I struggled as much with her. But I really try to do better in these first 3 chapters now. And I think she brings something really interesting to the table with being able to fly to these higher grounds and stuff like that, because you can actually manipulate the enemy movement a lot with her, which is something I found out in the chapter 3 Aesfrost, because you could actually make a lot of units waste their turns trying to follow her up on these houses, and you would just fly over to the next house after attacking, because she can just attack a unit from where she stands and then move and fly over to another house, and then they would all start to go down again, and you do the same thing in the next round. You fly back to your old house and attack again, and they will try to come after you again. So you can really do a lot with her, and I think this is the point where she will probably shine the most in these kind of mobility gimmicks.
Yeah, and especially because archers gain that increased range at elevation as well, so she can really attack from very far away. I personally only went down the Hyzant route, and so in Hyzant, she's really not super useful, because while there are rooftops, it's not as high as the ones on the Aesfrost route. And so for me, she was probably the worst unit that I had any access to at all. I just couldn't use her, and I ended up dropping her, and I didn't even know if I wanted to use her at all. The most use I got out of her was Chapter 2, and that was inflicting blindness with her blinding arrow just from a range on a bunch of the other random enemies, and that helped sort of ease the tension of the map. But I feel like had I gone the S-Frost route, having her just being able to jump vertically, I think she gets a 32 jump or something crazy like that for elevation. So I think that would have helped immensely more. But I am so torn on where to put her. Like, personally, if I was going to rank, she would go, like, at the very bottom, D or C tier or something like that. But I need to factor in your opinion here, because you did the S-Frost route, and you seem to have figured a few things out that I have not.
Yeah, I would actually disagree with that, because I think she's also a unit who has more utility than damage output. I think her blinding shot, and I think she got one which made the units immovable later when she levels up. I think it's again those utility moves which will make her good in the late game, probably. And there's another thing we have to factor in, and that's the kudos system, which they explain to us now in these first 3 chapters. And you gain extra kudos points for attacking the enemies from behind and for attacking the enemies from above, and I think there are some more factors.
There's one from a safe distance, I think, which is from far away.
Exactly, safe distance. And all 3 of them are very easily done by archers. And especially Hughette, who gets to fly on these rooftops and attack from there. And she, a thing I also kind of liked is that they were not that strict with the back attack. So you can also do the back attack if you're diagonally attacking a unit from behind. So she can really easily get these kudos points. And she can also proc the partner follow-up rather easily with her movement shenanigans. I think, personally, I would put her behind Roland.
Wow.
Because I think her damage output will be bad in the late game, but she has this mobility. But from what we have seen, we will also get other flying units later, so I guess her place will really depend on how good they will be, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are probably going to look back at this tier list in a few weeks and just laugh at everything we're saying right now, like, oh my god, how could we be so wrong? But yeah, that's fine. I can concede having her here in B tier. That sounds fair to me, really.
I mean, she's still at the moment the second worst, and she's definitely better than Geela. So I guess it's fair to put her there.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So next up is Erador, and I know you said he's not your type of character, but Erador is my type of character. And I really gained a lot of respect for what Erador can do in Chapter 2, because we're locked in that sort of box-shaped arena map, and it's just a wave of enemies all bum-rushing you. Now, I went down Hyzant for Chapter 3, and Erador isn't very useful in the Hyzant area because it's just full of mages who are attacking you at distance. But his provoke, I believe, if I'm not wrong, if you hit mages, they can't use spells on you. So it's not as bad, but it's not as useful because the mages have less of a chance of grouping up. So it's harder to get a bunch of them in with the provoke. But the fact that provoke with Erador makes everyone attack him takes the load off your squishy units. He's also super tanky. You can pair him with something like Frederica's Flame Wall with that provoke to get a bunch of, I think it's 7 fixed damage, but it builds up over time. And if you buff him with Benedict's shield buff for the defense and the resistance, all the damage he's taking ends up being something like single digits. So he's really, really tanky. And I feel like his usefulness is probably exponentially larger on the S-Frost route because those units are mostly melees. You can correct me if I'm wrong there in a little bit. But
There's some archers, but...
Yeah. And they buffed his damage output too, which is interesting. He was terrible in the first demo, but in this demo, I think he hits almost as hard as Serenoa does. So I almost want to put him up in S tier just because of how good he is, and also because I saw he gets a physical counter skill. So once he gets that with the provoke, it's GG, man. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing I'm kind of struggling with, I agree with all the things you said, but then I think they kind of stayed true to his character, and I think he'll gonna be the himbo type, not really too smart character, which is fine. I mean, each game needs one of these. And the thing I didn't like about him is, I agree with everything you said, but I think his provoke is kind of lackluster. So he's not as good in hitting these spells. So if that gets worse in the late game, then he might rather quickly fall off. He was really great in these early chapters, but if I'm not mistaken, I think I had cases where he didn't hit the enemies with provoke, and that of course is the worst thing if you don't hit your skills.
Yeah, exactly. And the rate of provoke proc on bosses is also lower.
True, but I mean, bosses are obviously also going to be immune to many of these effects later on, so I'm not sure. I definitely don't agree with S tier. I think he's really good in the early game, but I fear for him hitting enemies with these skills.
I can agree with that to a certain extent, but his usefulness for me in the early game was just nuts. So I can compromise on A tier if you don't think he goes up as high as S. Do you think that's fair? Yeah. Because he also hits as hard as Serenoa does. So his damage output is really not bad either. His movement is just a little bit lower. All right. So now we move on to the last two characters, and these ones are the route split ones. So Corentin is the ice mage who you get if you go to the desert, Hyzant, and Rudolph is the sort of hunter type archer kind of guy who you get if you go to S-Frost, which is kind of interesting because you would expect to see an ice mage in the ice area and maybe a hunter in the desert, but you know,
that's true.
It is what it is. I'll let you go first. Who do you want to talk about?
Well, I obviously have to talk about Rudolph because you don't know him that well.
Fair enough. So you can go ahead and we'll start with Rudolph.
So I think Rudolph was the character we didn't see in the first demo because the first demo gave us Corentin. So we know that the game makers went to Hyzant in their walkthrough. So I was actually very intrigued to see what Rudolph would bring to the table. He's kind of interesting. I would say he's kind of a mix of Hughette and Anna, because he has a really high damage output, but he also has like some gimmicky traps and things like that, and I think he will also get a sleep skill later in the game. So he has the damage, but he also brings a bit of utility. Having used him, I have to say, his damage output is nice, for sure, but he's kinda lackluster. Especially if I compare him to Hughette, who is also an archer. She really benefits from flying to these rooftops and from doing her stuff up there, from being safe, while he really doesn't get that with his infantry movement, and his high damage output skill is actually blocked if there are obstacles in the way. And funny enough, while Frederica doesn't target your allies with her AoE spells, he can't shoot through the allies to hit the enemy.
That's crazy.
So this will be a huge issue for him. And I really like the damage output, but I think in the long run he has to be behind Hughette, and if we don't put, I don't know, I would say C tier. Maybe we have to put Geela one down because he's definitely better than Geela, but I think he'll struggle.
That's interesting. I've seen a little bit of what his skills do, and I thought the traps were interesting for things like crowd control, because the enemies are probably stupid and they just run into them. But I didn't know about...
So I used the traps a lot. I think I used mostly the trap in Chapter 3, because it was really good to keep these multiple enemies away, and you can easily put the trap right behind one of your units in their back, because you know that the enemy AI will always try to go for their backs, so they will always step into it. But it's like, I don't know, they step into it and they end their action, of course, but it doesn't do a lot of damage, and it's gone in the round after that. And if I compare it to Hughette's blind shot, for example, this effect stays longer. It may not be, it may not activate as much, but it stays longer. And if I compare him to Corentin, which we will talk about soon, with the ice wall he's going to create, I really don't think that the trap will save him in the long run.
That's fair. So we can go ahead and put him sort of above Geela in C tier. I guess we can move Geela to D. That's fine with me. I don't really have much of an opinion on him because I haven't used him. I'm trying to be as pure as possible with my first playthrough, so I'll go down that route in the second one and see what's up with him. But for now, I'm just gonna have to respect your opinion on this one, and we can leave him there. But yeah,
I'm probably gonna eat my words later, but
you know what? We're gonna eat our words on every single character in this tier list, most likely. Like I said in the beginning, big disclaimer. This probably means nothing once the actual game comes out. But it's interesting to sort of speculate and see where we stand at the beginning.
Absolutely.
But now we are approaching the final countdown, and as things tend to cool down towards the end of the videos, we are cooling down with our Ice Mage Corentin. And Corentin doesn't really have much availability or much time for you to fiddle with him. He shows up on the Hyzant map, which is a fairly open map with a bunch of mages that are, I think, mostly weak to ice magic. His damage is amplified against these units, so it's not really a true measure of how strong he is. One thing I noticed that, compared to Frederica, he starts off with 2 damage abilities. And one of them is AoE, and it's weaker than Frederica's AoE, but his single target is much stronger, and it has silence on it, I think. And that's very useful from an assist standpoint, especially on maps with a lot of mages. You can just silence them and disable them for a while. And like we know from the previous demo, he has that ice wall, which is, I think, a 3-tile wall of ice. And you can just block your enemies from moving completely. So it's going to be very, very useful down the line for crowd control. Having said that, I struggle as to where to put him because obviously his potential is immense. He's got the AoE ice magic that doesn't hit for very much. He's got the crowd control and he's got the silence. But outside of that, I don't know what else he can do. And we haven't really had any high pressure situations for me to really test him. So, I mean, I definitely would, based off what you said, put him above Rudolph and above Hughette, at least for me. I don't know if in good faith I can just yet put him above Benedict or Roland, but maybe you have a different opinion on that one.
Yeah, I was also thinking and comparing him to Frederica. I think he has probably more utility than her. I thought it a little bit harder for him with the TP in Chapter 3, so I had even more issues making him attack compared to Frederica. I know that I remember the ice wall from the first demo because it was such a cool skill and it really saved my ass in that chapter where Serenoa's village is going to be attacked, or maybe not going to be attacked. I mean, spoilers. You never know. Maybe
it might have
he'll
changed.
get
That was a
attacked.
year ago, so we don't know.
That's true. But when you have really many enemies to take care of, this ice wall is going to be huge. It's going to save some maps. Again, I think in the end he will probably give more utility to your party than damage output. I mean, also considering if Frederica sets everything on fire, he obviously has the ice effect, making freezing the ground, which I think makes the enemy hit less.
I think it's 10% less accuracy, and then the
Something like
movement is reduced by, I think the movement cost increases to 1.2 instead of 1. I think that's the equation for it.
And I think that's a really good thing. Fun fact, I think this one also hits your own party.
Yeah.
So I don't know which kind of connections Frederica has that her AoE damage spell doesn't hit your party, but everyone else struggles with the party. That's really funny.
She's the main
But I
waifu, so
think-
she's exempt.
Yeah. But I kind of agree with you. I think he'll be around Roland somewhere. I think he's better than Hughette because she really only has the mobility to speak for her, and if we get another one who also has the same mobility, then she'll probably end up being the worst one. Yeah, so I think that's kind of fine. Fair.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this list, it actually kind of ends up a little bit different than what I envisioned, interestingly enough. But I'm actually, after discussing it with you, I've changed my mind on a few things. So I'm happy with where all these ones are. I definitely was really struggling with where to put Corentin because, like we had talked about, his potential for the future is just so high. And likewise, I've been struggling with Hughette a lot because she was so useless in my playthrough, but I've seen people talking about how good she is on the S-Frost side. And I think that's a good thing. I like the fact that these units are so radically different in terms of their usefulness, depending on the decision that you've made.
Yeah.
I
And
mean-
you know, I try to think about these characters, and from what we've seen so far, I think this game has really made an effort to make each character valuable in some sort.
Yep.
So I think even with Geela being in D right now, which is really just these first 3 chapters, I think all of these units will be really viable, and you can really just go with the ones you enjoy most and like most. I don't feel like there will be that really out of this world kind of character who just tops everyone else.
Yeah, I
I
think
think their design is really good.
every single class is, or every single character has a unique class and has their own unique way of playing. Which I've seen a lot of discussion about the lack of customizability in this game compared to Final Fantasy Tactics or things like Tactics Ogre. And I think the customizability for us in this game is the story.
Yeah.
And the way you take the story is going to alter how useful a character is or isn't in your path.
Exactly, and I really like that. I really like that because if you, I'm actually one of the players who hated the moment when they made classes open in games like Fire Emblem,
Yes.
because I really liked having these characters being true to themselves and being stick to a class and being good in something they excel in. And I think it makes it much more interesting to also play these different characters. Because if I can turn Frederica into a tank, then I will never play Erador.
Right, exactly.
And like this, I did pick him because he was really good in the map.
Yeah, it definitely makes you utilize the units in specific scenarios where you need them, as opposed to just turning everyone into, you know, a flying unit and shooting from afar, for example.
Yeah.
So I agree. And I think there is a little bit more customizability within the weapon tree itself. I remember seeing those boxes where it's like one or, you know, the other, where you can only pick one of two. So I guess you'll be able to toggle a little bit. But yeah, outside of that, I think that's all I have to say in terms of tier list. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I don't know if you have any last minute modifications on where you would put anyone.
No, I'm very fine.
All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Eldervi, for joining me for this. If anyone wants to check out Eldervi's content, he mostly does Fire Emblem Heroes stuff on his channel, but he's also an extremely talented artist, and I highly recommend checking out his work, and I'll leave links to all the stuff in the description below.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we'll see you guys in a... We're definitely going to have to do a follow-up tier list, you and I, at some point.
For sure, for sure.
And I'll continue working on some more sort of analysis and maybe speculation videos up until the release of Triangle Strategy, and we'll take it from there. So that's about it for this video, and I'll see you guys in another one very, very soon. Peace.
Bye.